à tous. Je vois qu'on est très très nombreux ici. Bravo au Cercle des économistes, bravo à Jean-Hervé Lorenzi. Il faut dire qu'il y a beaucoup de questions. Là, on va s'intéresser à un sujet, l'économie face aux ruptures. Ne vous inquiétez pas, on ne va pas parler de rupture politique, même si c'est un peu le sujet qu'on a tous dans nos têtes. On va parler de cette fin de la mondialisation telle qu'on l'a connue. En tous les cas, c'est ce que peut-être vont arguer certains. Les ruptures que nous devons affronter, que vous devez affronter, que l'Europe doit affronter, que la Chine doit affronter, que l'Afrique doit affronter, que la Finlande doit affronter. Si je dis ça, c'est parce que vraiment, nous avons autour de cette table ronde, tous les 3 continents, en tous les cas, sont représentés. Je dirais qu'il manque peut-être les États-Unis, Jean-Hervé Lorenzi, ça sera pour la prochaine fois, il faut dire qu'eux aussi, ils sont occupés. Alors, rapidement, je crois que vous les connaissez quasiment tous, en tous les cas, celui qui va coordonner cette table ronde, Philippe AGHION, professeur au Collège de France. J'en profite pour faire un peu de pub pour vous, Philippe. Votre livre sur l'IA, Notre ambition pour la France, que vous avez coécrit avec Anne Bouvreau, puisque vous avez présidé la commission pour l'intelligence artificielle, voir qu'est-ce qu'il fallait faire. J'ai envie de dire peut-être que votre rapport, il est un peu dans un placard pour l'instant, mais vous nous direz peut-être qu'on pourra le ressortir après les élections. C'est sûr que ça brouille. Et vous faites une dédicace, Philippe, je crois. À quelle heure? Vous pouvez nous le dire? Juste après, voilà. Donc si vous voulez son livre. À côté de vous, c'est Enrico LETTA, ancien Premier ministre italien, qui vient de remettre un rapport qui a été très publicité, là aussi, à l'Union européenne, sur comment on devait transformer l'Europe, comment l'Europe pouvait éviter le décrochage européen. C'est un point aussi essentiel avec ce nouveau Parlement européen, cette nouvelle Commission européenne. À ses côtés, alors je fais très attention parce que on m'a mis quand même des personnalités très impressionnantes, mais qui ont tous des noms un peu compliqués. Donc je vais tout faire pour pas essayer d'écorcher votre nom. Miapetra KUMPULA-NATRI, qui est députée, qui est au Parlement européen, qui est finlandaise. Et ce qui est très intéressant.
From Finland, and of course Finland is very close to Russia, and she is in the Commission of Sanctions vis-à-vis against Russia, and she will tell us about the evolution and the ruptures. Next to him, Pierre, an economist professor, who will tell us that this is the end of globalization, happy globalization. Next to him, Liqun JIN from Beijing, Vice President of the Infrastructure Asian Bank, a key individual in the Chinese government. He was Vice Minister of Finance, and he will tell us, the new Silk Road, is important, and especially when it comes to Southeast Asia. Then next to me, Kako, NUBUKPO, you know him, he's an economist. We know him at the Rencontres Économiques. Africa, of course, and he was telling me, if I take me as the last speaker, well, between the Chinese and European pressure, what is what of Africa? So now, Philippe AGHION, what ruptures have to be faced? Thank you. France, as you know, there is a major election in France next weekend that will define its future quite in a durable way, and its role in the world, in Europe, and whereas the world faces technological revolution, climate change, faces the problem of a war, there is war in Europe now. Those are the main challenges, and what will happen in 2 days will determine whether or not France can play its role. So it's quite a dramatic aspect of French history. So let's talk about the French and European loss. France is behind in the high-tech technology and in the rupture innovation versus the US, and now even versus China. China is getting the better, and the growth of our productivity drops versus that of the US. Why? Well, a recent study published by the Bocconi University, Jean Tirolese, who played a key role in this study. So I didn't know, Jean, that you'd be attending the meeting. Jean should be sitting here, actually, so that puts a bit of pressure, yes, indeed. So the study from the Bocconi University. Jean played a role there, as played a key role. There is a striking aspect. The high-tech industries, the software, IT, the biotech and pharmaceutical world represent 85% of the R&D private expenditures in the US, whereas the automotive industry absorbs more than 50% of the private R&D expenditures in Europe. Therefore, the US are leading when it comes to high-tech patent, IT, biotech, pharmaceuticals, whereas Europe is a leader in patents, in more traditional patents in transport and mobility. The US have an innovation ecosystem which is much better than ours. It gives us room to fundamental research. They've got great universities, labs, foundations for research, fundamental research. The capital risk system, which finances startups, institutional investors, mutual funds, which will finance innovation in large corporations. They have a major network, and we have nothing of that of the sort in Europe. And they also have a major tool for industrial policy, which even contribute further to guaranteeing their leadership in IT and biotech technology. It is the Advanced Research Project Agency. And the first was, it's called the Defense Research Project Agency, DARPA. It was founded in 1958 during the Cold War to deal with the competition with the Soviet Union for space and defense. And the DARPA program means that they were able to send men to space, went to the moon, and they created internet and GPS. They had the ARPA Energy and the BARDA, where we had the development of vaccine. This was possible only to the BARDA, which is that for biotechs. There is also the Horizon Europe program, which could change the situation when it comes to rupture innovations. But as the Bocconi report says, 11 billion euro of annual budget, only 1.4 billion euro are assigned, dedicated to the European Innovation Council for rupture industry. But it's not a DARPA, as the report says. Especially, it is submitted to the control of the European Agency for SMEs, and they want to support European SMEs. I love SMEs, but existing SMEs focus more on less breakthrough innovation, what you call the incremental innovation, but not breakthrough or rupture innovation. So Europe is not armed like the US or even like China is when it comes to see, if we pay attention to France when it comes to innovation policies, there were two policies under President Sarkozy. First, the tax research credits, 2 to 6 billion euros. Then there was the creation of the LABEX, Laboratory of Excellence, which receives specific means to attract the best researchers. What was the impact of the two initiatives? Well, a recent study has shown an amazing efficacy of the LABEX. The study shows that the creation of such a research and excellency laboratory stimulated rupture innovation and the R&D in the leading industries close to the LABEX. However, the research tax credit, but there was no proven demonstrated effect. So what are the lessons there? For innovation policies which are not targeted do not generate rupture innovation. This also applies for the tax credits, or for the European system I talked about. And the second is that rupture innovation innovation rupture starts with fundamental research, and we need LABEX, we need fundamental research, we need risk capital, institutional investors, we need the true DARPAs. And when we have to deal with China and the US, which have very aggressive innovation policies, France and Europe have to react, rethink Maastricht, rethink the articulation between competition policy and industrial policies, gives more freedom to member states to create an integrated European market with a banking union and the capital union. My fear is we got great researchers, we got great engineers, we got great IT specialists, but when we see the US or China with very aggressive innovation, Europe remains a regulatory giant. Europe will decline. And the drama in France is that in 2 days we might actually decline even more if we make the wrong choice. Well, Enrico LETTA will explain to us that in his report he answers all what is lagging in France or in Europe, because the landscape you described is rather scary. Enrico LETTA, you published in April, issued a report on the Europe competitiveness, how to boost the inner market with leading sectors, energy, telcos. But what do you say about the objective of rupture innovation? First, I'm very happy to be here. I will with a note of sadness. Last time I was here with Philippe Martin, great friend, great friend of the Cercle, of the Rencontres Économiques. So I'm somewhat sad to be here without him today. I will start with basic examples. So why Philippe said is true and impacts our lives every day. The report I was asked to write at the European level is a report which asked me to cover the entire Europe. I discussed it with Jean-Hervé when we met recently. I told him the story, which actually explains why Europe is lagging behind. We are there with national flags. We did not understand that national flags are too small in today's world, in which China, India, together, when we built this single market, were the 4% of the global economy. Today, they're 25% of the global economy. And we're still here with our national flags. An example, I decided to write the report while visiting the 27 countries. To write in my own country, to visit my country, and I hope you will do it during your holidays. Come to Italy to spend your holidays. You do it with the high-speed train, the Frecciolosa. For 8 years I lived in France. I traveled in France with the TGV. In Spain, same thing. In Germany, the same thing. I thought, okay, I'm going to go around Europe with the high-speed train. So, with the smallest continent in the world, we decided to become green. So, high-speed train. Well, it's impossible to travel in Europe by connecting the European capital cities with high-speed train. Why? Because each country has developed a domestic railway, high-speed railway system, and the high-speed rail track stops at the border, only Paris, Brussels. This is an example of what it means to have a fragmentation which prevents European competitiveness, because something for energy, something for telcos, and for the rest, and especially for financial services, because we all have our flag, national flag, and what's the impact of national flags on our French financial market? We don't have a large European financial market, and therefore, this is great for Wall Street and for the Chinese. And of course, innovation and rupture. What can we do when it comes to investment, when it comes to risk-taking, when investment risk-taking need to immediately to have a financial market which is able to do that, which is not the case in Europe. We got a financial market which is highly fragmented. So first purpose of my report is to explain that I wrote a roadmap in which I say we have to get to a tonic market for financial service, unique, but with one change, and this is the little proposal I will make to the Prime Minister, or to the Prime Minister who will come out on Monday, and I hope will be someone who will deal with such topics. Key question, why haven't we achieved a European financial service market? Well, simple. because in order to integrate, you have to overcome obstacles, because inertia goes to national, domestic issues, and we didn't do it for a very basic reason. And the simple reason is as follows: the financial market needs a push, to get together, and this push to get together at the European level needs political leadership. Someone who will say, we need to have European financial markets. But find me one political leader today who's able to put his face next to a proposal for the integration of financial markets. People think, well, that's not for me, that's for the bankers. That brings me nothing. What's in it for me, to have integrated financial markets? What's the key point? We have to do the integration of capital markets to be able to finance green transition and digital, which is the true topic. So the proposal I'm making, so we have to integrate markets, and the possibility to have money, private money. Why? Because private money, goes to the US. And the crazy thing is that the US integrated market is attracting our savings, which will feed and reinforce American companies, which come back to Europe with our money to buy our European companies. So, Hedwige, this is a European suicide. This was the integration of the European market. I'll close on that note. Is fundamental to give strength to Europe to overcome this with the risk-taking, which is absolute essential element of innovation. So my report, I really hope that this report, unfortunately, like reports, I hope it will not end up in a drawer or, stacking dust. I want this report to have a true life in Europe. So now we need to convince the public opinions, which is often the problem. Now, I know a lot of people here are convinced, but in the general public, might not be the case. Now, Miapetra KUMPULA-NATRI, you're from Finland, you're a social democrat, you part of this commission on the sanction against Russia, the rupture. You experienced them in the European Parliament and, of course, in Finland because of this war with Ukraine, with all the consequences for our soul and for our country.
So thank you very much for the invitation. Yes, I have been working this mandate 10 years in the European Parliament for digital and energy, so the twin transition. And it was then not asked, but we have to start work on the war. And I did not want to say aloud that it is war economy that is challenging us from the neighbor Russia, but we have to act. When I talk to economists, I must ask, what is the price for plan B? There's no plan B, that Ukraine would lose the war. That would change even more. Our security has been changed already. We cannot trust the international orders. We cannot trust the international agreements we had after Russia attacked Ukraine brutally. And it should be on everyday news, because its killing of the civilians is continuing. So in economical terms, where you have here so many people with the highest possible knowledge, the plan B is more costly. So also, what is the public good? What we should finance together with the public money? Can there be any euro better spent than support Ukraine today? Because if not, there will be a lot of insecurities on the border, and the border is European Union. So I hope this is not challenged after the new political leadership in different countries and in Europe is taking place. So then we can see that the sanctions we have been delivering, are they good or bad? Without sanction, situation would be much worse. Even Russian economy, we see that it is growing. It would grow 5% more without sanction. They would have more easy access for battlefield goods. But we have to do that work daily. As the special envoy David O'Sullivan says, that in Kremlin they are recruiting more people to circumvent the sanctions. So we do the very same. We have to make it more difficult. We have to find new companies in African countries, in Asia, in everywhere, to see that this is not possible. So we are also building up our own defense as an industrial policy, but also it's stupid at the same time to finance the other way. So this is the economical question as everything. So then a few other topics, very short. I think also where we need each other, security being first, climate is the issue not taking away from the table. And this twin transition, digitalization and climate, is not ready after 5 years of the von der Leyen's commission. It's not ready yet. We have to continue. And there is a political challenge. So many politicians saying that, oh, my citizens cannot pay for the renewable energy or so. But there is one concrete hint I had from Finland. The Confederation of Industries published an open list of the intentions of the green investments. And we are a country of 5.5 million. And the intentions of the companies on the green investments is 268 billion. About 100 billion is for the sea wind. And I see the France is doing very much the same. So this made it political challenger be quiet, because they don't want to say no for the planned investment. So I think this is needed everywhere, that you see the industry is ready to move. Or have you seen somewhere a company publishing an advertisement, my company will not cut emission, it will be as dirty as it was 10 years ago? I haven't seen those companies. So I understand the business life understands the climate change. So have to politicians, and not shake, but give the stability of the European tools on the ETS and others. So there also we need global cooperation and look at. So I just mentioned also, being a member of the trade committee, that we have new trade deals. We are very much committed on the international organizations for trade and others, but looking also global gateway to Africa to find more companions, and with the Asian countries to try to do bilateral when WTO is not working. And finally, for the digital, it was very good to shake the thoughts that why Europe is lacking behind, why only 2 AI companies among the 100 biggest ones. But we have more startups than the United States, we have a lot of innovations, and we should have the digital single market, as we have single market working for us. I was a little bit disappointed when we see that we have this recovery fund, 750 billion euros. And I could not believe before that 20% has to be invested on digital. Where are the results? It was nitty-gritty. Every country did some digitalization alone. Finland, we digitalized our railways. At the same time, we are a leading company on the quantum. But we did the normal digitalization. We should put our heads together to look for the digitalization that is strategical, and look also for the broader European ways to do that. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Miapetra.
Now, just a point to react to what Philippe said earlier on. Europe is regulation before innovation. Do you agree with that? Okay. Europe is regulation before innovation. Do you agree or not? Regulation.
Yes, yes.
Regulatory giant, budgetary dwarf.
Yes, it is very much true. I'm more on the line of the Anu Bradford, who said that the European way is to make the Brussels effect. Once we did the privacy, there is privacy laws coming in other countries, there's other like that.
That's true.
Yes, there is too much bureaucracy in Europe, that I don't like. But then I like very much regulation that says that privacy needs to be respected, children online needs to be respected. So I don't ask the big companies to tell me how to regulate. Oil companies never came to politicians and said, please regulate us. So neither does the big tech. But then we have to give the rules framework, a little bit less bureaucracy, but the clear rules where we want to say, and then do it together. I visited California many, many times. They are trying to do the regulation. So this is not black or white.
Okay, thanks a lot. Vous êtes économiste.
So, Pierre DOCKÈS, you're an economist. Everybody here knows you. Globalization as we've known it is over. So do we need to find a new economic model? Is it going to be protectionism? We really don't know. But what do we need to, how can we be protected from our Chinese friends in particular? Yeah, I would like to start with my conclusion. We really never know. So my conclusion comes from Albert Camus, who said that all previous generations had the goal of making the world new again. And he said that for our generation, the world, our objective is to ensure that the world doesn't come apart. I think, however, there is one distinction we need to draw with what Camus said. In order to avoid it coming apart, I think we need to make the world new again, together. That's in terms of disruptions. And then the general theme of our session is about bringing worlds together, reconciling the world. And since we're economists, of course, we're thinking about the exchange of goods, services, capital, but also, of course, the mobility of people, of information. So we're thinking about trade or commerce, as we talked about in the 18th century, in the broadest sense. So this makes me think about this theme of Montesquieu that was picked up again by others, which had talked about soft trade, gentle trade. What did Montesquieu mean by that? It was two fundamental things. First of all, it was about the fact that when merchants, men and women, travel around the world, they build relationships. And these are relationships that allow them to get to know each other better. And he concluded that as we would get to know each other better, wars would disappear and conflict would disappear. Well, that was 18th century utopianism, because we have to recognize today that people traveled, but they traveled with soldiers, with priests, and that was not always well appreciated by the rest of the world. So it's not just that people, it's not just through traveling that we can make wars disappear. But the second idea, which was even more important, was the idea which said that through trade and through commercial interests, which were considered to be a good passion, it was thought that this good passion would dominate over poor passions, which were obviously the desire for war. Once again, there's something utopian here, because in order for interest to dominate bad and evil passions, and we can see today how much evil passions are being unleashed out of France, around the world, and in France. In order for the good interests to dominate, they have to be shared. And so that brings us to globalization. Globalization, we've talked about happy globalization. It's true that for a lot of the planet, a lot of human beings have managed to raise themselves up out of extreme poverty. Countries have developed, but everybody knows there have been losers. There have been countries, regions, sectors through deindustrialization, massive deindustrialization. There are social categories that have lost out. And 25 years ago already, Dani Rodrigue was saying it already, globalization has gone too far. He was saying this 25 years ago, which is really quite remarkable when you think about. We couldn't yet see it very clearly at that time, but today it's undeniable that the accentuation of this sense of loss, not just actual losses, but a sense, an acute sense of loss, this has very dangerous consequences. There was a debate between Dani Rodrigue and Paul Krugman, because Paul Krugman, when he read Rodrigue's book with this idea that globalization had gone too far and that we had to slow things down a little bit and do some smart protectionism, Krugman wrote a letter to him and said, "You are giving weapons to the barbarians." Who did he mean by the barbarians? Well, he meant those nationalistic populists, the right or the far right. Well, it is undeniable when we can see how the world has changed in the US and elsewhere. The barbarians have really developed and grown in strength. I'm just coming to the end here. Let me wrap up with the barbarians. But what were the weapons? What was really the weapon that was being given to these barbarians? Well, it was really the fact that globalization was going too far. It was really that fact. Extreme globalization had dangerous consequences, harmful, deathly consequences for many countries and social categories, which allowed the barbarians to come to the fore. So if we need to ensure that the world doesn't fall apart, but yes, we need to do some remaking of the world as well, nevertheless. I just really want to respond here very quickly. Globalization has nevertheless reduced inequalities across the world in a general sense. Studies have shown this between countries, but within countries it's created inequalities. So there are some countries like Scandinavian countries who've put in place social systems, flexi-security systems that have made it possible for those who lose out in the context of globalization are compensated in some way. So they managed to compensate for these inequalities that are created within countries. And I think populism has emerged in countries like England and the US, where social policies have not been put in place in order to adapt to globalization. That was just a debate that I wanted to open up. Of course, I really don't agree with that, but there we go. So I suggest we have a coffee and chat about this later, because otherwise we could go on for some time. So thank you, Liqun JIN, for being with us now. You are a very important personality. You're leading the AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which of course is focused on developing infrastructure in Southeast Asia, and Western countries such as France are taking part with this. I'm going to be quite direct here, but just to come back to what Pierre DOCKès has just been saying, are you the barbarians of globalization? Pardonnez-moi la question.
Je vais parler anglais.
I'm going to be speaking English because I don't speak very good French.
Honor and a pleasure to be invited to attend les Rencontres Économiques in Aix-en-Provence. I would like to share with you my observations, including globalization, on some of the main themes of this conference. I like the idea of Relier le monde, connecting the world, or to be exact, connecting the different parts of the world. The last few years have been characterized by multiple interlocking crises, growing geopolitical tensions, ongoing supply chain disruptions, record high interest rates, asynchronized growth, deadly conflicts in some war zones, and their impact on the regional global economies, last but not least, increasingly catastrophic effects of climate change, to just name a few. A most noticeable and worrisome phenomenon in the present-day world is disruption, a febrile backlash against global economic integration. Global economic integration certainly has its side effects, which should not be ignored, but rather must be dealt with. But rejecting economic integration will give rise to economic woes for many countries, including developed countries. Recent years have seen the rampant efforts to push the decoupling and worsening protectionism, which threaten the recovery of many economies from the COVID-19 pandemic and economic slowdown. Not to reverse the trend will keep the global economy further down the road of fragmentation. Disruption by COVID-19 and other natural disasters are temporary. These temporary disruptions by force majeure should not be invited to be here to stay by intentional efforts to render the disruption of global production chain permanent. I think this is my very clear message. Now, we know the so-called beggar thy neighbor policy. In China, we have a saying, watch the fire raging across the river, because the fire is across the river. So at the end of the day, you see the town across the river is completely burned down, ruined. You may lose fierce competitors, but you lose a great market. You find you cannot sell anything across the river because there was no economy whatsoever over there. So beggar thy neighbor policy is no good. Watching the fire raging across the river without offering a helping hand is bad also. So different economies enjoy comparative different advantages. Advantages can only be maintained or even further enhanced by having your advantage subject to fair competition. I highlight fair competition. To safeguard an economist's advantage by isolating it from the rest of the world can produce the very opposite result. However, it's not just protectionism and rejection of foreign direct investment that have to be dealt with. More importantly, major economies, advanced economies, and emerging market economies in particular need to sit down together to strengthen economic cooperation. In the run-up to the WTO membership in 2000, we in China had huge debate. The wolf is coming. All the financial institutions will be wiped out by these fiercely competitive Western financial institutions. Our automobile industry would be completely wiped out, to say nothing of other consumer goods. What's the result? I think the other side is very much worried about the fierce competitiveness of the Chinese manufacturers. This is the reality. You have to live with reality. So my view is we need to work together. The global economy needs cooperation and coordination on a global scale. Just take a look at the 1997-1998 Asian financial crisis in Eastern Asian countries. Those countries were told to deal with this crisis yourself. What happened? Later on, when the contagion effect of Asian financial crisis spread to European countries, to North America, and the people start to say, hey, this is not local problem problem, we have to deal with it. Again, in 2008-2009 global financial crisis originating in the subprime mortgage meltdown in the United States. And then quickly, it became a global crisis. So I think if there are some crises, don't think this is a fire across the street. Nip it in the bud, working together to prevent a more catastrophic disaster. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I do just have one question. Enrico, I'd love to hear your response to what's been just said, particularly in terms of the automotive industry. It's interesting to hear this perspective from Liqun JIN. I think that what we've heard is really very important, and I think a lot of things are really true there, but I'd really like to respond just to communicate a European message. We, the Europeans, we like to make sure that we want to make sure that China remains a fundamental economic and political partner. This is really important for the future. What we have not understood and what I want to communicate is that it is impossible for us not to take a position on a key position, which is a key position for us, which is what Russia has done in Europe. If Russia does what it's done in Ukraine, that gives the idea that we can move borders with tanks. That's what happened during the 20th century, and that was a disaster for humanity in Europe. What we're asking is that our Chinese friends might understand that protecting and acting against this Russian attitude with regard to Ukraine it is very hard for us to understand, because we are experiencing something in Europe. You cannot take borders down with tanks. That's something that's so fundamental for us. Thank you, Enrico.
President China in this conference. I'm the president of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The message I would like to give you is that AIIB has extensive cooperation with the European countries. All of the Western European countries are our members, and we've been working very well. I think this is a very important platform for China as the major shareholder to work with the European countries to work out some of the differences. Thank you very much.
C'est ce qui s'appelle.
That is what you call avoiding the question in French. So now we're going to talk about a continent that has not been forgotten, even though you might think so. Kako and NUBUKPO, you're from Togo. You're a senior economist. You're an ex-commissioner. You asked me to mention that. When we talk about the disruptions that we're going through in this confrontation between these three blocks with two key blocks, and then there's this African bloc, which sometimes gets forgotten, I guess. Yes, when I was following this interesting exchange just a few seconds ago, I was thinking about an African proverb that says that when two elephants fight, it's the grass that gets the consequences. And the grass, well, it's Africa. So why was I saying that I should have spoken first? Is because Africa is 1.3 billion people. It's a population that doubles every 25 years. So in 2050, one in four of the world population will be African. And that's why there's an African emergency. So to feed into this discussion, I want to talk about these. There are four key shocks that we're going through. The first shock is the shock that we're receiving from the rest of the world. So there's the Russo-Ukrainian war, which we've just talked about. We should know that with a particular ingredient for fertilizer. We went down to $800 for a ton, which is less than half the previous cost. So we can no longer subsidize this kind of product. So this is a significant shock that follows the pandemic, and it came before the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and with the whole impact on the Suez Canal, which has led to inflation. So there's inflation with Africa, which is imported inflation. The second shock that we're facing is climate change. We've got drought and flooding, which now makes it impossible to forecast African harvest, whereas African economies are primarily rural. The third shock that we're experiencing is a security shock. When I go to Burkina Faso, a country like Burkina Faso has lost about half of its territory because of the rise of jihadis. So we're talking about states that are not really states anymore, with all the implications that means in terms of the rolling out of public policies. In states like that, about a third of the population is internally displaced, with issues linked to education, which that creates in terms of repercussions. So around the security question, there is a fundamental issue. And the fourth shock that I observe are political shocks. Africa has unfortunately seen a rise in coups to the extent that we're thinking about what is the right way for societies to be led. There's a return to illiberal models, whereas in the 1990s we thought we'd got to the democratic model that could be rolled out everywhere, in particular in Africa. So these four African shocks, why am I talking about them? Because these are accelerators for the transitions that we've been observing for a number of years now. Demographic transition, fiscal transition, climate transition. And so the second part of what I want to say is, what could we do to move forward? What solutions can we find? The first one is macroeconomic regulation. I think the idea of the IMF to release 250 billion is a really excellent idea, but since it's on the pro rata of for each of the states of the IMF, Africa only gets 35 billion. So, and that really isn't enough. So I want to talk to this audience about the need for increased amounts in terms of these funds coming from the IMF. We need about 100 billion in Africa. The second solution, beyond macroeconomic regulation, is the question of protection in terms of agriculture. We need to understand that when a rice grower works in the United States, for example, when he works for an hour, he produces 400 times more than a Senegalese rice worker working for the equivalent amount of time. But he doesn't have 400 times more production. So he makes savings. So when you put them on the same market, the Senegalese worker disappears. So if he ends up in a liberal situation where he could travel, he should go to the Paris region. He should migrate to the Paris region. If we want to avoid that, we need to put in place a kind of protection so that Africa can develop its own agriculture. We've got 500 hectares of agricultural land. We've got 1 billion young people. There's no reason why Africa can't produce what it needs. The third potential solution, third and penultimate solution, is the question of whether we can actually live in our planet. So Africa represents 4% of greenhouse gases emissions for 17% of the world population. So that means if we were doing what everyone else did, we should produce 70% 17% of greenhouse gas effects. And if we include the opportunity for catching up, because other people have been destroying the planet for centuries, we ought to be authorized to produce over 17% of greenhouse gas emissions. But if we follow that reasoning, our planet will not be habitable anymore. So I want to call for a compensation so that Africa doesn't exploit its ecosystems. And my last point, which is really very important, I think, so we can take the applause out of my time for speaking. So the fourth and last point is state, society, and territory, the connection between state, society, and territory, which needs to be rebuilt. We were talking earlier with my colleagues, and I was saying to them, but what's going on in France right now is the dress rehearsal for what's going to be happening in the world in the years to come, is that those who've been forgotten by globalization are not going to accept dying silently. So if we don't put together state, territory, and society again, we're going to hit some big trouble. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got 2 minutes left. Each of you, can you just say one word, a sentence in terms of your solution for connecting the worlds, relier les mondes? Let's start with Enrico. A very simple phrase, very simple sentence. In Europe, reconciling and connecting the worlds means acting. Inertia will mean that our fragmentation will take us to decline. And I can say this as a non-French citizen who loves this country. It's in your hands to make sure that action is positive for France and for Europe. Miapetra.
Internal markets, I would say that has been good, and it is good if we are finding the strategically where we integrate, and then there is a lot to do on the local level. Comparison with the USA is taking very much time, but if you compare per capita, we are not lacking that much behind the change. But now we are seeing the trend that we don't want more people come from outside, and we don't want to take that will really, really be good for our economy. So this is a challenge, so we have to be quite much more brave.
Thank you. Pierre DOCKÈS.
Pierre DOCKÈS, just one sentence. One sentence only. A few years ago, a lot of years ago in China, there was a slogan that was important. It was the fourth modernization. The fourth modernization was democracy. So democracy as the fourth modernization, I think, is essential, and I think that needs to be shown. Liqun JIN. Relier les mondes, bringing the world together, what would you do?
Countries, governments, and the people should have confidence in yourself.
Bravo.
Kako, you've already spoken really very clearly, very strong words, but if you had another African proverb for us, that would be helpful. No, I've got no more African proverbs. But I call for rational solidarity. If we don't help Africa for ethical reasons, we need to help Africa to help itself so that our planet can be habitable. Philippe. I think rather than protectionism, we need innovation in all senses of the word. We need to have inclusive innovation. Everyone needs to take part in the innovation process. We've suffered in France with the fact that innovation has not been inclusive enough. There has been a vertical approach to power. I really believe in dialogue, parliamentary dialogue, social dialogue, and inclusivity. I think that's how we're going to overcome the populisms. Thank you very much. This was really excellent. Let's be innovative.